Hey, how are you? My name is Thomas and welcome to my gaming channel, ILY NPC.
We're coming back on the air after an interruption due to technical problems.
Today, we're taking a break from the speculation around Diablo IV's beta and moving our attention back to Exoprimal. This past weekend, Capcom allowed players to test their new team-based dinosaur horde game in open beta. The open beta ran from the 16th to the 19th, so only a few days, which to be completely honest, didn't offer up a whole lot. Capcom promises a lot more at full release, but I know more about their pre-order bonuses and battle pass tiers more than I do about the other forms of playable content in the game. As is the case with a lot of trailers and betas recently, we are introduced to their live service models in the form of cosmetics and battle passes before we even know what the full game looks like. So, before we move on to my experience with Exoprimal, I wanted to quickly cover this problem. The different ways we get to engage with games in development these days, whether it be through early access where you knowingly pay for an incomplete product, whether it be open betas, or game previews. Once the game is in the hands of the player, I fully believe it is open to whatever scrutiny the player base feels. This is only more elevated when sales of the game are pushed on consumers earlier and earlier into development. While this is incredibly helpful to new and growing studios, so much of the beta experience these days are hijacked by trying to drum up microtransactions before games even release. Not to mention, these features are usually prematurely locked. These days, games are starting to feel like government bonds, where you place your money into a product you can only realize on its maturity date, and that's lame. If a developer promotes a live service or a microtransaction model during early access or beta, I will only think negative things about their product offering if that monetization model is obscured or hidden away from players during early access. The finals is a good example of what I'm talking about. Players could engage with the battle pass in the beta, and it helps to complete the full picture of the game's potential. Of course, this is more the case as games steer away from paid DLC for a complete game, and instead embrace a purely monetized season system. If developers focus more on live service, we should expect a preview of that service during beta or early access, as these systems are better indication of a game's longevity than the actual game mechanics themselves. Think of Halo Infinite. Their live service is the reason the game is doing so poorly. Halo Infinite, in my opinion, plays great. It feels like Halo. But their lack of consistent content updates pushed players away to better managed game services. The Diablo IV beta, again, lacked any preview of their season system, which in the wake of Diablo Immortal only adds to the skepticism of how good the game will feel on release. Of course, first impressions will be a lot more positive than when the game hits full release and players have to deal with microtransactions in front of them all the time. There is just no way to definitively say how the game will perform months or years later, when we have none of the mechanics in front of us that generally determine if we continue to play a game in this live service market. Although these methods are exponentially more profitable for game publishers, it's more or less a self-inflicted wound that will kill the game's longevity, despite the premise of live service being the opposite. Developers either have to devote themselves to more content, or watch their game implode only 6 months after release, because the content the game needed to be complete is now rushed in a post-launch to keep the game profitable. In my opinion, these monetization models are not sustainable, especially for developers who come out of crunch in the last few months before release, only to have that crunch return for the months or years after its release as well. I feel bad for developers and their employees, knowing their hard work will never cease. It feels like so many developers are bogged down with live service that we don't have studios focusing on completing a product during development. Instead, AI is building our games, while artists are making skins to prepare for battle passes. There is more balancing being done on the progression of battle pass than there is on the balance of the game's multiple classes. Anyway, back to Exoprimal, Capcom's newest franchise, pitting teams of 5 against hordes of dinosaurs in a competitive PvEvP setting. I was pleasantly surprised by the Dino Survival game mode we had access to during beta. Unfortunately, players didn't have access to any of the game's other offerings, like additional multiplayer game modes or the single-player campaign. Per my rant, we also didn't get to see much of any of the progression systems in practice. You could level up your characters by playing, and items would unlock, but we had zero menus to interact with these unlocks. And that's just the game's basic progression system. We also did not get to interact with the store or battle pass tiers that Exoprimal is offering. While the game is objectively fun, without interacting with the free battle pass, I fear this game will be quite the monotonous grind. So far, gameplay is very tight, to the point where players don't have much agency in what they do. Dino Survival has a procedural aspect to it, where the in-game AI is determining what events happen next. While this sounds like it would help differentiate each match from one another, I didn't feel like this happened as often as I expected. Each match, on the same map, ended up playing the exact same way, with the exact same objectives. Inside of Dino Survival, players have 6 different objectives that can populate on each of the 3 maps we had access to. After this objective PvE portion of the match, whichever team completes these objectives the fastest, well, it doesn't matter. The entire 10 to 15 minutes of PvE leading up to the PvP portion of the match doesn't give either team any benefit during the PvP portion, which makes me wish these were separated. Matches feel bloated because of this, going on too long. Instead, I would have loved to see a competitive PvEVP game mode separate from a competitive multiplayer deathmatch. It is incredibly fun to compete against another team of 5 to see who can clear the hordes fastest, and the PvP team deathmatch portion makes for some intense combat, fighting off random hordes of dinosaurs while at the same time strategizing how to defend against the other team. These 2 game modes feel great independently, but personally I felt some hesitation to start another match as I felt like it was a bit of a time sink. These 2 game modes are very different from each other, and it makes a lot of sense that Capcom is allowing players to change their exosuit, which is their class system, on the fly to meet certain demands of each game mode. While this in practice is fast and easy, it feels more like a gimmick to group multiple game modes together that don't particularly mesh with each other. During the beta, we had access to 10 different exosuits, making up a total of 3 different classes: assault, tank, and support. During the beta, these were accessible from the start. However, on full release, players will slowly unlock new classes as they progress their player level. Additionally, each exosuit can be outfitted with a rig, which can be equipped onto any exosuit for a specific ability, like a shield, cannon, drill fist, or an electric boomerang. Classes felt reasonably differentiated, and each exosuit that makes up a subclass had very different utilities. Stand behind the front lines as Krieger, peppering dinosaurs with your minigun from the safety of your bubble shield, or rush up to deflect attacks as Murasame and set up your timing for a devastating sweeping attack. I didn't play much support as that role was often already taken, which is a good sign for how well support switches between healing and suppressing fire. The Assault class was particularly fun, especially as Barrage, who is exceedingly good at clearing large gangs of dinosaurs and setting traps for objectives during PvP. In the grand scheme, I do believe players will enjoy unlocking new exosuits and playstyles as they progress through the game. Performance on PC was the biggest highlight. Frames rarely dropped while dinosaurs were spawning in by the dozens, hit detection felt honed, movement in combat felt snappy and responsive, and the game looks really good. During my 10+ hours with the beta, there were no queues, no crashes, and no dropped matches. So far, the game feels highly optimized on PC, and that is not generally the case anymore. My feelings can be summed up pretty succinctly. The game is coming day 1 to Xbox Game Pass, and that is how I will be playing it. I'm not sure this will be worth $60, so I feel there is no harm in picking up this title for cheap through the Game Pass, especially as more games like Redfall and Starfield release that give us more reason to subscribe to the Xbox Game Pass service. gameplay feels good enough to periodically revisit Exoprimal to see how the live service is shaping up, but with Capcom already focusing on Battle Pass mechanics, I'm not sure I'll have enough time in between huge launches this year to really invest in completing each season. MW2 only released last October, and I'm already burnt out from its long Battle Pass progression and mid-content updates. As I said before, live service can be great for a game. However, it's more often than not a death sentence to the game on release. Developers already embrace yearly releases of popular titles. MW2's live service has already been killed by a confirmation that we will receive a new COD this November, contradicting the 2-year model they promised following Activision's announcement of DLC with remastered maps from older versions of the game. Halo Infinite was called Infinite. Words don't matter anymore. Actions speak much louder. Capcom has already pulled back the curtain when it was revealed the executive producer of Resident Evil 7 Biohazard intended to have a live service with online multiplayer and microtransactions. Every game is being called a live service, but that description is now being co-opted by developers to buy themselves more time to lie. The game doesn't feel finished? Oh, well, it's a live service, dude. Yeah, okay. Really, they just released a shit game. Maybe I'm too cynical. Maybe I'm tired of being lied to. The smarter we get, the less blind optimism we have. Studios have a lot of good faith to win back from us. Thank you for watching. I know this was a bit more than just a review of the Exoprimal Beta, but it's hard to express my feelings when the gaming landscape is so confusing these days. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.